In this tutorial, we're going to talk about the different shapes that WireCAD is capable of making from the equipment library and when you might use them. Again, I'm using the Getting Started with WireCAD project that we created earlier. And I'm going to open the equipment library from the Advanced Tools menu and click the Equipment Library button here. To start with, I'm going to use the 360 Systems Image Server 2000 device. I like this one for presentation purposes because it has lots of ports and different types of I/O, different signal types, so on and so forth. Looking at the equipment library, I've selected a piece of equipment and I know I can change its port selection. I want to talk in this video about the different types of display appearances that you can create with WireCAD. The most common is probably the functional block, and that's why it's presented as the default display. This radio button set controls and refines the display that I'm going to create. Here under functional block, I've got the full functional block. I can create it as a concept block, which will remove some of the port information. I can further refine that from the display preferences page. Or I can collapse all of these ports down to just one per signal type in use. I might do this if I was displaying some sort of concept drawing. Further, I can switch to what we refer to as a mappable terminal. Now, unlike the functional block, where we're actually creating the block in the equipment library, here we're going to go get a file from the disk and we're going to map the port data onto that file, repeating as many times as we need to accommodate the selected inputs and outputs. One might use the mappable terminals selection to display different types of equipment that don't do well with a traditional functional block. An example of that might be a patch bay. Here I've got a patch bay that's set up to show 2 rows of 32 jacks. And this works okay sometimes. However, if the jack has some kind of specific normaling configuration where the top row connects to the bottom row normally, then this doesn't really represent well the concept that you're trying to convey in your design. And that's where a mappable terminal comes in really handy, because I can find one that represents some kind of normaling configuration, and I can map the definition onto a series of terminals that represent that jack with its normaling configuration. Here I've presented the idea that there's a jack and a full normal connection between the top and the bottom jack set. Looking around a little bit further, I have the ability to create blocks from user-defined shape files. These are files that are placed in the shape files folder in the support path. They can be any CAD file, and WireCAD will use the display preference settings to map ports onto them. Now again, this is kind of a hybrid approach between the functional block and the mappable terminal approach, where we've got a file and we have a set of data and display preferences that are going to determine the final outcome or the final display of the block. Here your pin spacings and pin widths and those types of things, those all apply. The port selection controls partial appearance of the block, but the main geometry of the block comes from the file itself as it's found on the disk in that folder. We can also use the same approach where we use an external file and the data from the database to create the appearance of the block. Here, for my front panel file, I'm actually going to a file on the disk that's in my blocks support path in a folder called 2D Elevations, is a generic 2-rack unit 2D elevation. It has attributes that are known to WireCAD, and so the routine takes the data from the database and it applies it to those attributes. Another approach you can use to create front panels is to put the dimensional data in the details section and then click Front Panel from Dimensions, whereupon you'll be asked to choose the mechanical stencil form. And you've got a number of them that you can choose here. And here we can see the rack enclosure stencil being applied to the dimensional data that's in this device definitions details. Plan view file creation in WireCAD allows you to create blocks that are going to be used in a floor plan. In order to associate a plan view file with a database entry, we use the plan view file field here. Here I'm pointing to a file that's in my blocks support path. That's a private phone outlet. Anytime I select plan view file for this device, this appearance will be created. Most of the work in the plan view files is done behind the scenes in invisible attributes. Here I'll add the plan view file to the drawing. And I'll go ahead and view the attributes of this block by using the CAD tool Edit Attributes. And here you can see that we've filled in the manufacturer name and model, and all of this information is actually in hidden attributes. I believe the only attribute that shows is the sysname. Okay, what follows is a discussion on how we actually create the blocks. You can quit the video here or proceed into some more advanced understanding of how we actually do this. When we create a functional block, we gather the information from the various databases, the selected piece of equipment and its I/O, as well as the project signal types information. We feed that and the display settings or the display parameters into our code, which actually creates the shape. When we're creating a mappable terminal, we actually have a repetitive process going that loops for every selected input and output. We get the actual appearance from a CAD file. We go get that from a file and we feed the information from the database into the file, repeating this as many times as we have selected I/O. When we're making a custom shape, we're kind of doing a hybrid where we have the file as a base set of geometry, but then we're also going to use our display settings, our appearance settings, and all of our data to create a completely new block that has a marriage of our data and the geometry from the user-defined shape. When we're creating a front panel from the file, we're going to go get the CAD file. The CAD file determines the actual appearance and has attributes that are known to us. The code simply applies our data to those attributes. When we're creating a front panel from dimensions, the code creates the shape. The appearance settings determine the stencil and actually how the shape is drawn. And our selected piece of equipment and its data, manufacturer model, and so on and so forth is fed into the device. When we're creating plan view files, we're going to get a file and we're going to apply the data from the database to hidden attributes within the file. Okay, so that's a look at creating shapes within the WireCAD equipment library and the different modes and methods that you can use to produce different shapes. For more information, check out the other tutorials. We do appreciate your interest in our products. We thank you for your input, and keep sending your emails, keep giving us suggestions to help us make the product better for you. We do this for you. We thank you again. That is all.